بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب ما أغنى عنه وما كسب سيصلى نارا ذات لهب وامرأته حمالة الحطب في جيدها حبل من مسد صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجهم وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم فاستغفروا الله واستغفر لهم الرسول لوجدوا الله توابا رحيما صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, please recite a second loud salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Tonight, inshallah, we will continue with the story of the life and legacy of Ibrahim. We reach this point in the story of Ibrahim, where Ibrahim has now left from the hometown of Ur, and he has entered into the city of Babylon. When he enters into the city of Babylon, he finds more people who, instead of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are worshiping different objects that they find around him. And including in those objects are the stars, the moon, and the sun. And this is where the Quran tells us that Ibrahim was now given a special knowledge. Through this knowledge, he is able to bring about arguments and proofs for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, different from what Ibrahim had mentioned in his hometown of Ur to his uncle and the tribe of his uncle. This is where Ibrahim now starts to bring himself down to the level of the people in Babylon. And he points to the star, and he points to the moon, and he points to the sun, and he says, these are my lords, and as they fade away and as they disappear, Slowly you will find Ibrahim one by one dismisses these objects as them being his Lord. When it came to the star, for example, or the planet, which is the Venus, you find that Ibrahim, the moment this star or this planet started to disappear, the light started to fade away, he said, Inni la uhibbul afilin. He said, I'm not the type of person who would worship something that sometimes is there and sometimes is not there. Then Ibrahim came to the moon and he said, فَلَمَّا رَأَى الْقَمَرَ بَازِغًا. When he saw the moon is shining so bright, he said, this moon could be my Lord. But the moment this moon started to fade away and disappear as well, فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قال لئن لم يهدني ربي لأكونن من الضالين من القوم الضالين. He said, if my Lord doesn't guide me, I will be lost. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to guide me. Whoever my Lord is, He has to guide me. Otherwise, this moon, it also faded away. It also disappeared. This also cannot be my Lord and my God. Then he moved on to the sun. He said, هذا أكبر. This is the biggest thing, the greatest thing out there. فلما أفلت قال إني بريء مما تشركون. The moment this sun also disappeared and nighttime fell again, Ibrahim said, you know what? I want to disassociate myself from all of these gods. إني وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا. I only worship one God, and that one God is the one who created this heavens and earth, the one who brought these things into existence after they did not exist. The moment Ibrahim mentioned this, the verses of the Quran mentioned two more verses in which the people in the city of Babylon then raised objection to him. وَحَاجَّهُ قَوْمُهُ. His people then turned to Ibrahim. They said, Ibrahim, you're fundamentally challenging our gods and our lords now. They started to argue against him. Ibrahim brought about the idea that, listen, I have proof for my beliefs because you don't have proofs for your beliefs. Because there is no proof that this idol, for example, can bring you rizq, it can bring you sustenance. You are the one that has to be afraid. I am not the one who has to be afraid. I have my own path. I know what I'm talking about. You don't know what you are talking about. You do not have a proof for these idols that you worship, and therefore, you are the one who should be afraid. I shouldn't have to be afraid of these idols who there is no proof that they have any power at all. This brought an end to the conversations that Ibrahim was having with his people. And as we mentioned, it wasn't just this one instance, multiple conversations we have gone through in the story of Ibrahim up to this point. Now Ibrahim is going to make that final move. He has that final plan to show to his people and demonstrate to his people that these idols, they don't really carry much weight. They don't really carry much value. They cannot defend themselves. They cannot protect themselves. This is where the Quran tells us. Ibrahim then turned to his qawm and his people, and he said, on this special day, this special day of celebration that you have, the moment you leave the city, I will come and I will shatter and break all of these idols. وَتَاللَّهِ لَأَكِيدَنَّ أَصْنَامَكُمْ بَعْدَ أَن تُوَلُّوا مُدْبِرِينَ. This is what I'm going to do. And his people didn't take him seriously, or maybe some of them thought that these idols would defend themselves. They left. When they came back, this is where they found that Ibrahim had now entered into the temple. And we mentioned yesterday that when Ibrahim entered into the temple, the Quran takes us into those special moments where Ibrahim is walking in the temple and he is uttering some words. He is speaking to himself and these idols. And he says, قَالَ أَلَا تَأْكُلُونَ. Don't you guys eat from this food? And Ibrahim was just looking at how unfortunate this situation is, that so many people believe that you idols can eat and see and hear. The reality is you don't have any of these things. You cannot see, you cannot hear, you cannot think, and yet these people, they believe in you so fiercely that they put food in front of you. قَالَ أَلَا تَأْكُلُونَ. This is where we ended the story yesterday. Tonight, inshallah, we'll continue with the story of Ibrahim, and in order to do so, we'll pose the following questions. Number one, when Ibrahim entered into the temple and he started to break the idols one by one, what are the steps that he took in order to show that the greatest idol and the greatest but was the one who broke all of the other idols? Number two, how long did it take for our own Prophet Muhammad salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi, to finally have an opportunity to break the idols that were sitting and situated in the building of the Kaaba? Number three, who did the Prophet ask for help when he was going to go and break the idols that you find in the Kaaba? Number 4, what did Shaitan say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? After he found out that he was wrong for not doing sajda to Adam, that makes Shaitan who he is today. And how does this relate to the way the people of Ibrahim reacted when Ibrahim showed them that they are on the wrong path? And number 5, and the final question that we will delve into tonight, what title did the Quran and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give to Ibrahim when Ibrahim stood in the face of his community multiple times and he defended his faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these 5 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal farajam. The Quran tells us that Ibrahim entered into this temple. He started to speak to these idols, and he was speaking of how unfortunate the situation is, that people believe in these idols so wholeheartedly. Then you find the Quran starts to describe for us those moments where Ibrahim is going to break the idols. These moments, brothers and sisters, are very critical moments. They are very special moments. They're not moments that we look back in history, we say, yes, someone was walking into a temple, he broke some idols, for example, and that's it. He threw some objects on the ground and that's it. No. These idols played a very critical role in society. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. The Quran says Ibrahim entered into this temple. فَرَاغَ عَلَيْهِمْ ضَرْبًا بِالْيَمِينِ, and he started to push these idols down one by one with his right hand, or maybe with strength, and they started to fall and shatter and break into pieces. Then the Quran says, فَجَعَلَهُمْ جُذَاذًا, he took all of these idols and made them into pieces. He broke all of them. إِلَّا كَبِيرًا لَهُمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ يَرْجِعُونَ, except for the biggest idol. Ibrahim left this biggest idol. And these are thoughts and these are plans that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted to Ibrahim. Not every human being will think about these ideas, yes? This was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaching Ibrahim of the wisdom of how to demonstrate in the best of ways that these idols don't defend themselves. So he left this greatest idol standing there. And the hadith tells us that he even took the axe that he was using to break these idols. He took the axe and he let it hang by the neck of the greatest idol. The Quran tells us he did this لَعَلَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ يَرْجِعُونَ, so that when they came back, they would come towards Ibrahim and they would come back asking about who did this? Who is it that broke all of these idols? Okay. When these idols are shattered and they are broken, now Ibrahim is walking away from this temple. You and I have to understand the gravity of this moment. Far too many times when we go through the stories of the Quran, we think of them as something happening 1400 years ago, or in the case of Ibrahim, thousands of years ago. We don't understand how great of a challenge Ibrahim is posing to society at this point. These idols, brothers and sisters, were not just objects. Today there are many who worship idols, for example. Today there might even be many who sell idols. These idols, many of them today do not have the same role in the life of people today that they used to have during the time of Ibrahim or during the time of our Prophet. Things have changed so much. Today you might find an idol, someone might even buy an idol, God forbid, because it might looks nice, for example. They put it in the corner of their house. It's not necessarily something that is part of the core of their life. It's not something that they swear by. It's not something that they live by. It's not something that they're willing to give their money and their wealth for normally. During the time of Ibrahim, during the time of the Prophet, these idols had a fundamental role in society. Imagine if someone came to you, God forbid, and he started to slander Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He started to disrespect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or he started to disrespect the Ahlul Bayt. These things are central to your faith. These things are central to your life, yes? And if this person were to challenge these things, at the very least, you would feel the duty to defend. Why? Because they're central to your life. Similarly, these idols, of course, in a false manner, were central to the life of these individuals. You and I sit here 1400 years later, 3000 years later. We say, yes, Ibrahim broke some idols. These idols were carved out of stone. They were carved out of wood. That's not what the idols were for the people of that time. When you broke this idol, you were fundamentally challenging the customs and the culture of all the society that you lived in. This was huge. Ibrahim was not doing some small thing. It was very, very extraordinary what Ibrahim was doing. No one would dare come close to these idols. People would sacrifice for these idols. Their whole life revolved around these idols. This is very important to understand, because when Ibrahim does this, this is what shows us the strength of the faith of Ibrahim. Yes, if Ibrahim were to come, some idol sitting in some corner, not too important, kick them and move on, this doesn't show too much strength. Ibrahim is now challenging society in its totality. And this is exactly why you find when it came to our prophet also did not have the opportunity to break the idols until 20 years after his mission began. When did our prophet begin to break these idols? When the prophet finally had this opportunity to come back to Mecca and conquer Mecca. The conquering of Mecca, that from a social and political perspective was an absolute masterpiece. The way the prophet took over Mecca with so little blood being shed, even though there could have been thousands upon thousands of people who would die on that day, the prophet approached it in the most strategic and beautiful manner. When the prophet approached Mecca and he entered into Mecca and into Masjid al-Haram, you find that then he approached the Kaaba. And this is that moment after 21 years after he has been chosen as a prophet, that now he has the opportunity to break these symbols of disbelief. Yes? What did the prophet do in these moments? Did the prophet go and try to break these idols on his own? No, you find that the prophet chose one of his companions to come and stand on his shoulders to slowly push down these idols one by one. Who was this companion? Which companion of the prophet was it? Out of the thousands of Sahaba that he had, who had the honor to stand on the shoulders of the prophet, an honor that none of the other male Sahaba were ever given, even the females were never given. Who was this individual who had this opportunity and this fadila? When you look into history, you find that the prophet asked Ali ibn Abi Talib, Ya Ali, you can come and stand on my shoulders. Why? Because Ali is part of this mission as well. The prophethood that Muhammad has, in its own way, there is another mission that Ali has, but the mission of Ali and the mission of Muhammad, they go hand in hand, yes? They are of the same nature and essence, even though Ali is never a prophet, never was a prophet, but he is working for the same cause. Muhammad said, Ya Ali, you can come and stand on my shoulders, and you can break these idols with me. A fadila that none other of the Sahaba were given at that time. And this is not the only fadila that Ali ibn Abi Talib has. This is not the only exclusive characteristic that Ali ibn Abi Talib has. No, he had many more. This is why you find, brothers and sisters, great Sunni scholars like the famous Imam an-Nasa'i has a famous book which doesn't usually get as much attention as his Sahih. He has another book, for example, it is called Khasa'isu Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. Those characteristics that are specifically narrated when it comes to Ali ibn Abi Talib. And in that book, he narrates a number of different characteristics that none of the other Sahaba were given. None of the other Sahaba had except for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Amongst them, he mentions this concept that Ali ibn Abi Talib was the only one who ever stood on the shoulders of our beloved Prophet. Nonetheless, you see, the Prophet had to wait 21 years before that moment could present itself where the Prophet could now break these idols. These idols were very critical to history. So Ibrahim breaks these idols, yes? And these idols were idols, like we said, people were willing to give their lives for them. People were willing to give their wealth for them. As the Quran says, فَنَظَلُّ لَهَا عَاكِفِينَ. People's lives revolved around them all the time. Before we move on with the story of Ibrahim, we want to pause here for a moment. Pause here for just 1 second. It's a question we have to ask ourselves. If Ibrahim goes around and he is getting rid of these idols, and the characteristics of these idols was such that people used to care about them so much, and their whole society used to revolve around them. They used to sacrifice for them. If this is how we're defining these idols, and Ibrahim is going around and he's breaking these idols, is it fair to say we have idols of our own in today's society as well? Is it a fair question to ask what idols there are in society today that if you would want to break them, then you will be held accountable? There are idols today. There are many idols today. There are things in society that if you decide to go against, then all of a sudden you will see, as tonight's title is, they will put you up for trial. They will not be happy with you going against this. One of the idols of society, brothers and sisters, is physical beauty. Especially when it comes to the female. Physical beauty. Take a look at the society that we live in. The objectifying of the female physique. How often does this happen? This is an idol in today's society. And when you find, for example, a sister decides to have a proper covering for herself, yes? Whether it is the full hijab and covering, which is wonderful, or even if she is making her way towards that. Some of us are on a journey. Some of us are working our way towards that. But even if she is going to dress in a modest way, you find that society has an issue with that. Society all of a sudden says, wait a second, that's an idol for us. You don't have the right to touch that. You don't have the right to change anything when it comes to these customs. This is what you find in France right now, yes? Because this beauty has to be used in a particular manner. If you decide not to do that, they will have you stand trial. Now, at a young age, you don't have the right to wear hijab, for example. Why? Because you're messing with the idols of society. You don't have the right to change things in this society, even if it's for the better. These are idols we have in society. You have to respect them. You don't have the right to touch them. When a young man decides to lower his gaze, one of the biggest trials of a young man is this. To lower his gaze, when he is doing this, he is breaking one of the most important idols in society. When you want to do the work of Ibrahim, you don't have to grab an axe and, go around and break things. No, you have to lower your gaze. When you lower your gaze, you're breaking an idol in society. As a young woman, when she covers herself, when she wears her hijab, she is breaking an idol in society. That's why some people don't take it so well. That's why some people wouldn't want to see that day where these things become the norm, where a woman respects her body. They don't want that. This is an idol in society. It makes a lot of money for them, actually. They don't want that to happen. Another idol you have in society is fame. You are supposed to come and you are supposed to sacrifice yourself for this fame, for these celebrities, for whoever is getting more likes, more follows, whatever the case might be. You are to sacrifice yourself for these things. These are idols in society today. Another idol in society is money and wealth. How often do we hear, brothers and sisters, in today's world, the people who have money, how often and how easily they can take advantage of others? Why? Because this has become an idol in today's society. And if you decide to challenge it, then many will be there to raise objection to what you're doing. But understand, when you practice your faith and you practice it fully, in its different dimensions, in the outward manner, whether it's with my hijab, whether it's with my salat, whether it's with lowering my gaze, for example, in the inward manner, when it comes to my own family, the akhlaq that I have, the affection that I show them, however I practice this religion, know that you are practicing the message of Ibrahim, yes? You are called Muslim because of Ibrahim, no? هُوَ سَمَّاكُمُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ مِنْ قَبْلَ. Know that by practicing your religion, you are breaking idols the same way Ibrahim was breaking idols 3,000 years ago. This is the message of the story of Ibrahim. Look at what idols you are breaking. Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Now, when Ibrahim broke these idols, like we said, very significant moment. The Prophet, when he broke the idols, very significant moment. The verses of the Quran or Hadith tells us that when these idols were being broken by the Prophet and Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet was reciting this famous verse of the Quran, verse 81 from Surah Al-Isra, قُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلِ. Tell them that the time of truth has come and falsehood is going to leave إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. And falsehood is truly something that will disappear and fade away. The verses of the Quran that the Prophet was reciting in those moments. When this happens, because of how significant it is, they are not going to just let Ibrahim walk away. Now these individuals are returning back from this celebration. When they come back, they were hoping to see this temple that is decorated, this temple that has food in front of the idols. They returned to a temple now that was chaos, except for this one idol. So what did they do? When they returned, they say, قَالُوا مَنْ فَعَلَ هَذَا بِآلِهَتِنَا. They said, who did this to our lords and our gods? إِنَّهُ لَمِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. He is definitely a transgressor. He is definitely, doing injustice to all of us by breaking all of these idols of ours. Okay, what did they do? Some of the people in the crowd who Ibrahim had told before he left for the celebration, they said, wait a second. We know what happened. What do you mean you know what happened? There was this young man. His name is Ibrahim. You might have come across him before. He said he was going to do something. We didn't take him too seriously. قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا فَتًى يَذْكُرُهُمْ. We heard of Ibrahim saying some stuff about these idols before. It's probably him. قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا فَتًى يَذْكُرُهُمْ يُقَالُ لَهُ إِبْرَاهِيم. They call him Ibrahim. They said, we have to go and get him. And other verses of the Quran say, فَأَقْبَلُوا إِلَيْهِ يَزِفُونَ. They started to walk to him and his house quickly and with anger. See, Ibrahim, he was messing and essentially challenging the very fundamentals of society at this point. It wasn't just some stone or rock that he broke. That's the way it looks to us in hindsight, thousands of years later. No, Ibrahim had fundamentally challenged everything that they believed in. فَأَقْبَلُوا إِلَيْهِ يَزِفُونَ. They started to walk towards him with anger, and they said, قَالُوا فَأْتُوا بِهِ عَلَىٰ أَعْيُنِ النَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْهَدُونَ. Go and grab this Ibrahim, bring him. If he's the one who did this, we have to figure out who did this, why didn't he do this, what was the reason behind it. They said, we have to bring him in the front of everyone. Everyone has to see this trial. Everyone has to see that Ibrahim is going to be held accountable for this. So they went to him. They brought him. Ibrahim, قالوا أأنت فعلت هذا بآلهتنا يا إبراهيم? Did you do this to our lords? This is where Ibrahim is now going to show that argument that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed him with the knowledge of. Ibrahim didn't just break these idols, brothers and sisters, to get on their nerves. In fact, our prophets never did something just to get on the nerves of another person, just to frustrate another person. That's not what they were trying to do. It wasn't a personal matter. They were trying to have these individuals wake up. So they come to Ibrahim, they ask Ibrahim, أَأَنْتَ فَعَلْتَ هَذَا بِآلِهَتِنَا يَا Ibrahim? Is this what you did to our lords, Ibrahim? And Ibrahim answered to them with the most beautiful of responses. He said, قَالَ بَلْ فَعَلَهُ كَبِيرُهُمْ. He said, no, I didn't do it. You know what happened? You see that great idol, the biggest idol, the one that you guys say is the strongest and he's the most powerful and he gets everything done for you all. He was the one who did all of it because you guys believe these things actually are alive and they have powers. No, the biggest one did it. Look, only the biggest one is the one that's not shattered. Only the biggest one has the axe hanging around its neck. It's the biggest one who did it. Oh, this moment, brothers and sisters, was such a critical moment for the people of Ibrahim. They all knew that this biggest idol could not have done such a thing. The Quran says they had this one moment of realization. One moment of realization. The Quran says they thought to themselves for a second, فَرَجَعُوا إِلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ. You know, sometimes you're so busy defending falsehood, right? You're so busy living a terrible life, for example, a life full of sin. Then at one moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wakes you up. In that one moment it's almost as if everything around you pauses for a second. I don't know if you've experienced this before. It's almost as if everything around you pauses for a second and you say, wow, I am wrong. I know I'm in the wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. This is what the people of Ibrahim are going through in this moment. فَرَجَعُوا إِلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ. They looked at themselves and they said, you know what? I think he's right. فَقَالُوا إِنَّكُمْ أَنْتُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. They said, you know what? We're the transgressors. We're in the wrong here. He's right. This greatest idol could not have done it. In fact, none of these idols could do anything. Why is it that we worship these idols so much? In this critical moment, brothers and sisters, people will fall into two different categories. There is no third category. All of the people on earth fall into two different categories when it comes to this moment. That moment when you realize you were wrong, there's two categories of people. And depending on which category you and I fall in, that will decide our fate. It's as simple as that. What is that moment? That moment is when you realize you are wrong. People then fall into two categories. One category of people sit back and say, you know what? I was wrong. I apologize. Then you have another category who says, you know what? I know I'm wrong, but I'm going to double down and I'm going to continue on my path. If you're in the first group, eventually you'll make your way towards the right path. Because even if you lived a life of sin for thousands of years, maybe you need one moment of realization. Then you're like, you know what? I was wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. I could die. I could be punished. That's it. You have the humility to accept the truth that's presented to you. God forbid you fall under the second category. The second category is a very scary category because this person has this moment of realization. But even when he has this moment of realization, he doubles down on his falsehood. What happened to the people of Ibrahim? The people of Ibrahim, in that one moment where they woke up, they had that moment of realization. The majority of them, the Quran says, ثُمَّ نُكِسُوا عَلَى رُؤُوسِهِمْ لَقَدْ عَلِمْتَ مَا هَؤُلَاءِ يَنْطِقُونَ. They then looked at Ibrahim, they defended their idols to Ibrahim. Oh, the mistake that they made. They had a moment of realization. But what did they do? They turned to Ibrahim, they said, Ibrahim, you know these idols, they're more powerful and more well respected for them to speak on their own behalf. They don't speak on their own behalf. We speak on their behalf. They doubled down. This, brothers and sisters, this characteristic is what made Shaitan who he is today. You know, many times we ask this question, we say, how did Shaitan become this evil creature? Yes? How did he become this person who goes around and he tries to get everyone to do wrong things and he tries to deceive different people and tempt everyone? How terrible is this Shaitan? But when you go back and you look at the roots, what you find is what made Shaitan who he is today was this attribute and this behavior. That when he realized he was wrong, he would double down on his mistake. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him, قَالَ مَا مَنَعَكَ أَلَّا تَسْجُدَ إِذْ أَمَرْتُكَ, why didn't you prostrate when I told you to prostrate to Adam? What did Shaitan do in that moment? Did Shaitan sit there and say, you know what? I was wrong. I should have done tawbah. No. He sat there and justified it. He sat there and said, قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm better than him. خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ خَلَقْتَهُ مِن تِينٍ. And even when he was walking away, what did he tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He said, Ya Allah, فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي, because you misguided me. Yeah, it was your work. I'm not going to take responsibility for this. You misguided me. فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي. Now I'm going to go and misguide thousands of other servants of yours. This characteristic, the roots of it stem from arrogance, is one of the most dangerous things that you can come across. If you want to have good relationships within the household, learn to not double down on your mistakes. I don't know how much I can stress this. If you want to have a good friendship with another person, learn to accept your mistake. Don't double down on your mistake. It's so ugly and disgusting when any human being doubles down on his mistake when he knows he was wrong. If you want a good relationship with your child, with your parent, with anybody, you are to accept your mistakes. And if you want a good relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this month of Ramadan is the time where you accept your mistakes and you make a decision to change things around. Otherwise, you and I are just like the people of Ibrahim. ثُمَّ نُكِسُوا عَلَى رُؤُوسِهِمْ لَقَدْ عَلِمْتَ مَا هَؤُلَاءِ يَنْتِقُونَ. What are you talking about, Ibrahim? I don't even know what you're talking about. Just, burying the truth in that moment. Many of us assume that if we want to be amongst the greatest servants of God, we have to be perfect. The verses of the Quran tell us you don't have to be perfect. You make mistakes. You might do haram things every now and then. The key is the muttaqeen, those who are fearful of God. The key with them is that when they make a mistake, إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً أَوْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ, they repent afterwards because they're willing to accept their mistake. This is so key, brothers and sisters. Hadith says, when a believer and a servant of God looks upon his sins, and he just accepts this mistake and acknowledges that he has committed sins that he is worthy of punishment for, before he opens his mouth to do istighfar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives his sins. Why? Because fundamentally istighfar is what? Me admitting to my sins, accepting that this was wrong, accepting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can punish me if He wants to, accepting your mistakes. This is what the people of Ibrahim did not have. Except a small group of them, they started to believe in Ibrahim. And this is where Ibrahim, as we continue with the story, after a little bit of time, he left the city of Babylon with this group of people, including his relative Lut alayhi salam. Lut was a prophet, but he was a relative of Ibrahim as well. He believed in the message of Ibrahim. As this story now comes slowly to an end, you find that this group of people, they doubled down on their mistake. They said, Ibrahim, you know they don't speak, but that's not because they're weak or anything. They just don't speak because they don't want to. We speak on their behalf. Ibrahim said, you know what? I'm done. Uffin lakum walima ta'buduna min dunillah. Whatever I tell you, whatever argument I present to you, you won't listen to me. You don't want to accept the truth. I am going to disassociate myself from these lords that you have. Number one. Number two, don't think that these idols bring you sustenance. فَابْتَغُوا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ الرِّزْقِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings you sustenance. Because they used to say, if we worship these idols, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send us sustenance. That's number two. Number three, وَإِن تُكَذِّبُوا. And if you reject my message, know that there were many other prophets who came before me and their people rejected their messages. You're not the first. Don't think that you're hurting God by rejecting His message. Just know, I was responsible to bring you the message. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do the hisab and the reckoning with you. Number three. Number four, he said, listen, today all of you so unanimously defending one another, saying, yes, these are our idols, we're not going to change things around. He said, know that today, even though you worship these idols based on these relationships that you have with one another, these friendships that you have with one another, know that on the day of judgment, يَلَعَنُ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. On the day of judgment, you all will show up, you all will look at one another, and you will curse one another. That why did I worship this idol? Because this friend of mine, because of this relative of mine. You all act like you're putting up a very solid front. Right? You're all united in your disbelief. On the day of judgment, you're going to turn against one another. And this is a lesson. If I do something because of a friend, if I do something because of a relative, that's haram. I know I shouldn't be doing it, but I do it because my friend says so, because my spouse says so, because my children say so. Yes, it's haram. Know that that same individual on the day of judgment, you will turn to them and say, you know what? I don't want to have anything to do with you because you caused me all of these problems. This is why the Quran says this person on the day of judgment, he shows up and he has all of this regret. And the Quran says that this person has all of this regret. Why? He says, because I found a friend. The moment this friend showed up in my life, I started to do terrible things because of him. But he's nowhere to be found today. He's nowhere to help me today. Ibrahim says, listen, if you all worship these idols, you are also solid in your approach because you have one another. You find strength in one another to do your haram. No, on the day of judgment, this whole strength is going to fall apart. You guys are going to be pointing the finger at one another on the day of judgment. Yes, today you have power, you do whatever you want to do. On the day of judgment, you will be held accountable. You will point the finger at one another. This brings to an end the moment that Ibrahim is now standing trial. And of course, if there was a winner for this trial, it was definitely Ibrahim. And the reason why the Quran gives different titles to Ibrahim is because of these moments. Because he stands with so much faith in the presence of this community. Amongst those titles that Ibrahim is given in the verses of the Quran, because of this strength that he has on his own, he's one person. The Quran says, Inna Ibrahim kana ummatan. Ibrahim was one person, but he was like a ummah all by himself. That's how strong he was. That's how influential he was. He was one person, but his faith was so strong that he could stand in front of thousands of people. He could make his case. He could stick to his path. Inna Ibrahim kana ummatan. He was like a nation for us, even though Ibrahim was just one person. From this trial, some of these people, they believed in Ibrahim. Very small minority, as is the case with most prophets. Then when this trial came to an end, the people who worship these idols, the people who own these idols, they said, you know what? Enough is enough. We can't stop Ibrahim anymore. Too many arguments, too many solid proofs. We don't know what to do with Ibrahim anymore. The only thing that is left with us to do against Ibrahim is to have him burn alive in front of us. قالوا حرقوه وانصروا آلهتكم. They said, listen, if you want to help these idols, if you want to save your idols, burn Ibrahim and burn him alive. And this is where Namrud and the empire now gets entangled in this business of trying to burn Ibrahim alive, while they don't know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had his own plan for Ibrahim and for the message of Ibrahim. That, inshallah, we will leave for tomorrow night. With that, we will bring tonight's talk to an end. I want to take a moment for us to recite Suratul Fatiha for all of our Marhumeen and Marhumat, especially the Marhumeen and Marhumat of the sponsors of tonight's program. Before I mention the sponsors, inshallah, I just want to re-emphasize that all of the brothers and sisters who tune in, we're very thankful that you tune in and that you trust us with your time and you trust us with your attention. And we pray that, inshallah, if you've benefited from the talks and from what the whole City of Knowledge team has been able to offer, because it's just not one person. There's tens of people who work very hard for me to be able to be here and to provide this content, and for all of us, including myself, to learn. Inshallah, let us all contribute as much as you can. There are many slots that I'm looking at the sponsorship right now that are still available, and very inexpensive slots, really. So if you want to do that, you can go to ckdfw.org, and inshallah, you can contribute for your marhumeen, for your loved ones, and anybody else who wants to sponsor any of the programs, inshallah. The sponsors of tonight's programs: Saeed Saeed Hassan, Rizvi, in loving memory of all marhumeen. Brother Kazim Mehdi and sister Aisha Ali and family, in loving memory of Sayyid Ali Mahdi. Brother Ali and sister Farwah Siddiquee and family, in loving memory of Haider Raza Rizvi, a son of Azhar Raza Rizvi. And also Brother Asif and sister Zeenat Patel and family, in loving memory of all marhumeen. Let's take a moment to recite Suratul Fatiha for all of our marhumeen and marhumat with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء يا سيدة النساء العالمين السلام عليك يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي المجتبى السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا قمر بني هاشم، يا أبو الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا أم المصائب، يا زينب بنت أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا شهداء كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، يا علي بن موسى رضا راضي بالقدر والقضاء. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. يا سيدي أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وزهورك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.